Now to the fight against ISIL. A chilling call to arms allegedly issued by the leader of the terror group is fueling more speculation about his fate. In an audio clip released Thursday, a voice purported to be that of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi encourages supporters to, quote, erupt volcanoes of jihad. This comes days after reports he was seriously wounded or killed in a U.S. airstrike. The 17-minute message doesn't mention the airstrike, but does call the aerial campaign a failure. Top U.S. military leaders updated Congress on the fight against ISIL in Syria and in Iraq. The battle takes on new urgency as Al-Qaeda vows to join the fight as ISIL's ally in Syria. U.S. military involvement has been limited to air attacks against ISIL targets and advising Iraqi troops. And critics of President Obama's plans have two chief questions. Will the U.S. have to commit ground forces, and is the campaign working? CCTV's Sean Callebs joins us with more.
Elaine, thanks very much. A political change is coming to Washington, D.C. The next Congress will be controlled by Republicans. Today, House Armed Forces Committee members heard from the U.S. Defense Secretary, who urged lawmakers to back the president's plan for destroying ISIL. The Pentagon says it will be costly, time-consuming, but adamant that U.S. combat troops will not be needed. It was a chance for the U.S. Defense Secretary to update congressional leaders on the fight against the Islamic State.
Since I testified before this committee 2 months ago, our campaign against ISIL has made progress.
The U.S.-led coalition against ISIL, as the American government refers to the jihadist group, now has 16 partners and has launched more than 130 airstrikes against Islamic State targets. Secretary Hagel says the attacks are making an impact.
This pressure is having an effect on potential ISIL recruits and collaborators, striking a blow to morale and recruitment. We know that. Our intelligence is very clear on that.
The U.S. says it will take 80,000 well-trained Iraqi and Peshmerga troops to drive ISIL forces from Iraq back into Syria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to...
Testifying before the House Armed Services Committee, Republicans are critical of President Obama's plan. They say the thousands of ISIL troops are going to be able to alter their attack tactics and won't be an easy target for U.S. fighter planes and drones. The head of the committee openly wondering if U.S. advisors and trainers will be enough to degrade and destroy the Islamic State.
Limiting our advisors to headquarters buildings will not help newly trained Iraqi and Syrian opposition, their forces to hold terrain, much less defeat ISIL in the field.
Hagel is adamant U.S. ground troops will not be needed, and military intervention is not going to be enough.
Our comprehensive strategy is focused on supporting inclusive governance, sustaining a broad-based regional and global coalition, and strengthening local forces on the ground.
Secretary Hagel says for the time being, the U.S. will not expand its fight to include the regime of Syrian President Assad, saying the focus must remain on ISIL. He also urged Congress to swiftly approve the $5.6 billion Hagel says will be necessary to fund the fight against ISIL through the year 2015. Elaine?
Do you think, one, that would pass Congress, and two, it seems like, politicians always seem to promise one thing, no ground troops, and then leave an opening, kind of wait a few days, leave an opening just in case?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult not to approve that money moving forward because virtually everybody says, including the Defense Secretary, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Republicans, Democrats, that ISIL remains a threat to the U.S., its allies, as well as the Middle East. And right now, the U.S. is the best effort to try and cut the head off of the snake, if you will, for lack of a better term. Moving forward, will there be ground troops? No one knows for sure. We know that the U.S., Obama and Chuck Hagel both say no. However, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs today, Martin Dempsey, did say he is leaving open the possibility that he will recommend the use of ground troops to Obama if he believes it's necessary. But he quickly added a caveat saying, at this point, I do not see that in the foreseeable future.
All right, Sean Callebs, we'll wait and see.